Welcome, this is a story in easy English, level A2B1. Listen slowly, read the subtitles, and your English will improve. Today, we tell the true story of Marie Curie. But first, listen to this. It is late at night in the year 1902 in the city of Paris. In a small, old shed there is no light and no fire. It is cold. The rain falls on the roof. Inside, a woman stands very still in the dark. She is tired. Her fingers are burned and cracked. For 4 long years she has worked in this poor little room. She has boiled tons of black rock. She has stirred a great pot with a heavy iron bar for hours and hours. And now in the dark she looks at a small glass dish on the table. And in that dish there is a light, a soft blue light, a light that comes from nothing, a light that glows all by itself, without fire, without a lamp. It is beautiful and it is strange. It is a new thing in the world, a thing that no one has ever seen before. The woman looks at the blue glow. Her eyes shine. She does not know it yet, but that soft blue light will make her famous all over the world. It will give her 2 of the greatest prizes on earth. And slowly, quietly, that same light will kill her. Her name is Marie, and this is her story. So how did she get here? How did a poor girl from a small country, a girl who was not even allowed to go to university, end up in this cold Paris shed with a light that glows in the dark? To understand, we must go back. We must return to the very beginning. Get comfortable, listen slowly, and learn English with the story of Marie Curie. Marie was born a long time ago in the year 1867. She was born in a city called Warsaw in a country called Poland. But at that time, Poland was not free. It was a hard and sad time for her country. Poland was ruled by a powerful neighbor, Russia. The Polish people were not the masters of their own land. The rulers were strict. In the schools, children were not allowed to speak freely about Poland. They had to learn in the Russian language. They had to hide their own history. It was a country under control, a country that had to whisper. Marie was born into this world. Her real name was not Marie. Her Polish name was Maria Skłodowska. She was the youngest of 5 children. Her family was not rich, but they loved learning very much. Her father was a teacher of science and mathematics. Her mother ran a school for girls. In their home, books were everywhere. Knowledge was treasured like gold. But the family had many troubles. When Maria was a little girl, the Russian rulers took away her father's good job. After that, the family had less and less money. They had to take in students to live in their house, just to pay for food. And then came something much worse. First, one of Maria's sisters became sick and died. And then, a few years later, her mother became sick too, with a slow and terrible illness of the lungs. Little Maria watched her mother grow weaker and weaker. And when Maria was only 10 years old, her mother died. Imagine that. A little girl of 10 who has already lost a sister and a mother. It was a heavy start to a life. But this pain did not break Maria. In a strange way, it made her stronger. It made her quiet, serious, and very determined. She turned to her books. In her books, she found a world where things made sense. And Maria was clever. She was not just clever, she was brilliant. At school, she was always the best. She learned quickly and she remembered everything. She could read for hours and hear nothing around her. When she finished her school years, she won a gold medal. She was the top student of all. But here was the problem. Here was the Great Wall in front of her. Maria was a girl. And at that time in Poland, girls were not allowed to go to university. The doors of higher learning were closed to women. A brilliant boy could dream of becoming a scientist. A brilliant girl could not. It did not matter how clever she was. The rules said no. So what could she do? Maria and her older sister, Branya, made a plan. It was a beautiful plan built on love. Far away in France, in the great city of Paris, there was a famous university. And in Paris, women were allowed to study. So the two sisters made a promise to each other. The plan was simple but hard. First, Maria would work and send money to Branya in Paris so that Branya could study to become a doctor. Then, when Branya was a doctor with a good job, she would send money back so that Maria could finally go to Paris and study too. They would take turns. One would climb, then lift the other. So young Maria became a governess. That means she went to live with a rich family far from home, and she taught their children. It was a lonely life. And every month she sent most of her small pay to her sister in Paris. She waited. She waited for years. The years were long. Maria was far from her family. She read science books alone late at night to keep her mind alive. Sometimes, surely, she must have thought that her turn would never come. But she did not give up. She kept her promise. And at last, after years of waiting and working, the day came. Branya was now a doctor in Paris. She had kept her side of the promise. She wrote to Maria and said, "Come to Paris. It is your turn now." So at 24 years old, Maria left Poland. She got on a train. It was a long, cold, cheap journey across Europe. She sat for days on a hard wooden seat, wrapped in a blanket to save money. But she did not care about the cold. She was going to Paris. She was going to the university at last. After so many years of waiting, her real life was about to begin. When Maria arrived in Paris, she changed her name. In France, people called her Marie, Marie in the French way. And she began her studies at the famous university called the Sorbonne. For Marie, the Sorbonne was like heaven. Finally, she could study anything she wanted. She could learn physics. She could learn mathematics. She could sit in a great hall and listen to the best teachers in the world. This was the dream she had waited for so many years. But life in Paris was very hard. Marie was very poor. She had almost no money. She rented a tiny, cold room high up under the roof of an old building. In the winter, the room was freezing. Sometimes there was ice on the inside of the window. To keep warm at night, Marie put all her clothes on top of her blanket, everything she owned, just to stop shivering. And she was often hungry. She lived on bread and butter and tea. Once she was so weak from hunger and cold and study that she fainted. But she got up again. Nothing was going to stop her now. Not cold, not hunger, not anything. Marie studied like a person on fire. She worked in the day and studied at night. She spent her days in the laboratory and her evenings in the library. She had no time for parties or friends. She only had time for science, and her hard work paid off. In her exams, she came first. She was the best student in all of physics. Later, she took another exam in mathematics, and she came second. The poor girl from Poland was now one of the finest young minds in Paris. And then one day something happened that would change everything. Marie met a man. His name was Pierre Curie. Pierre was a scientist too. He was quiet, gentle, and very clever. He was not interested in money or fame. He only cared about his work and about ideas. When Marie and Pierre met, they talked about science for hours. They understood each other perfectly. For the first time, Marie had met someone who thought the way she did. Two quiet, serious minds in love with the same thing. Slowly, their friendship grew into love. But it was a special kind of love. They did not just love each other. They loved the same work. They wanted to spend their whole lives doing science together, side by side. Pierre asked Marie to marry him, and she said yes. Their wedding was very simple like them. Marie did not wear a beautiful white dress. Instead, she wore a plain dark blue dress. Why? Because after the wedding, she could wear it again in the laboratory. That tells you everything about who Marie was. For their honeymoon, they bought 2 bicycles and rode around the French countryside together. They were simply happy together and free. Now Marie and Pierre worked as a team. And soon, Marie began the work that would make her name live forever. At that time, a strange new discovery was exciting the world of science. Another scientist had found that a certain metal, called uranium, gave off strange invisible rays. These rays could pass through paper. They could even pass through the human hand and show the bones inside. Nobody knew where this energy came from. It was a great mystery. Marie decided that this mystery would be her work. Where did these rays come from? What were they? She began to study carefully and patiently. She gave this strange power a new name. She called it radioactivity. That word, radioactivity, was born from Marie's work. Then Marie made a very important discovery. She was studying a black rock that came out of the ground, a rock that contained uranium, and she noticed something very odd. This rock gave off far more rays than the uranium inside it should give. Far, far more. It did not make sense. There was only one answer. There had to be something else in the rock, something new, something hidden. A new element that nobody had ever found before, even more powerful than uranium. Pierre saw how important this was. He stopped his own work and joined his wife. Together, they set out to find this hidden element and show it to the world. But finding it was almost impossible. The new element was there, but only in tiny, tiny amounts. To find even a small piece, they would need tons of the black rock. And they would have to break it down, boil it, and clean it again and again to slowly find the tiny hidden treasure inside. And where did they do this enormous work? Not in a fine laboratory. They had no money for that. The university gave them an old shed. It had a leaking roof. It was hot in summer and freezing in winter. It was a poor and miserable place. And in this poor shed, Marie and Pierre began one of the greatest scientific works in history. For 4 years they worked in that shed. Marie did the hardest physical work. She boiled huge amounts of black rock in great pots. She stirred the boiling mixture with a heavy iron rod, almost as big as herself, for hours at a time. The work was exhausting, but Marie was strong and she did not stop. Slowly, out of tons of rock, they pulled out tiny amounts of new material. And Marie and Pierre did not find one new element. They found 2. The first new element they named polonium. Marie chose that name in honor of Poland, her home country, the country that was not free. Even in her science, she did not forget where she came from. And the second new element was the most amazing of all. They called it radium. Radium was incredibly powerful. It glowed. It gave off a soft light in the dark, a light that came from inside the element itself. It gave off energy all the time without stopping, as if by magic. Marie and Pierre loved it. Sometimes at night, they would go to their shed just to look at the little glowing dishes of radium shining blue in the dark like tiny stars. They did not know back then that this beautiful glow was also dangerous. They did not know that these rays were slowly hurting their bodies. Marie's fingers became hard and sore. She was often tired, but nobody understood the danger yet. To them, radium was simply wonderful. In 1903, the world finally understood how important their work was. Marie and Pierre, together with the scientist who had first found the strange rays, were given the greatest prize in science. It is called the Nobel Prize. Marie Curie became the first woman ever to win a Nobel Prize. Think of that. A poor girl who was not even allowed to go to university in her own country was now honored before the whole world. But even in this great moment, there was unfairness. At first, the prize was going to be given only to Pierre and the other man. The people in charge almost forgot Marie simply because she was a woman. It was Pierre who spoke up. He said clearly that the discovery was his wife's work as much as his own. He said he would not accept the prize without her. Because of him, Marie's name was added where it belonged. Now Marie and Pierre were famous, but fame did not make them happy in the way you might think. They were quiet people. They did not like the crowds, the reporters, the constant attention. They only wanted to go back to their science in peace. They now had a little more money and they had 2 daughters whom they loved. Life, for a short time, was good. But then the story turns dark again. It was an ordinary day in 1906 on a wet Paris street. Pierre was walking, lost in his thoughts. He stepped into the road. The street was busy and slippery with rain. Pierre did not see the heavy horse-drawn cart coming towards him. In a terrible instant, he slipped and fell under the wheels. Pierre Curie was killed there in the street. He died in a moment. For Marie, it was the end of the world. Pierre was not only her husband, he was her best friend, her partner in everything, the other half of her mind. They had shared every idea, every hope, every long night in the shed. And now, suddenly, he was gone. Marie was crushed by sadness. She wrote sad, private words to her dead husband as if he could still hear her. Her heart was broken. Many people thought that now Marie would stop. She was a widow. She had 2 young children. She was alone, but they did not know Marie. Marie did not stop. The university offered her Pierre's old teaching position. They asked her to become a professor at the Sorbonne. No woman had ever held such a position there before. Marie said yes. She became the first female professor in the history of that great university. On her first day, the great hall was completely full. And when Marie began to speak, she did not talk about herself or about her sadness. She simply continued the science from exactly the point where Pierre had stopped. It was her way of honoring him. The work would go on. And Marie's greatest honor was still to come. A few years later, in 1911, Marie Curie won the Nobel Prize again. Not the same one, but a second Nobel Prize, this time in chemistry, for her work on radium and polonium. Think about how amazing this is. She was the first person in the whole world to win the Nobel Prize 2 times. And even today, more than 100 years later, she is still the only person ever to win it in two different sciences, in physics and in chemistry. From a cold room under a roof in Paris, the poor girl from Poland had reached the very top of the world. But around this time, Marie also learned how cruel people could be. Some did not like a woman being so famous and so powerful. Newspapers wrote unkind and untrue things about her private life. Crowds even gathered outside her house. It was a hard and ugly time, but Marie held her head up. She did not answer the ugly words with anger. She answered them with work, always with work. Then came a great war. In 1914, the First World War began. It was a terrible war with millions of soldiers and terrible wounds. And Marie, the great scientist, asked herself a simple question: how can I help? How can my science save lives? She had an answer. She remembered those strange rays that could pass through the body and show the bones inside. We call them X-rays. Marie knew that X-rays could help doctors. With an X-ray, a doctor could look inside a wounded soldier and see exactly where a bullet or a piece of metal was hidden. This meant doctors could operate faster and save more lives. But the X-ray machines were in the big hospitals, far from the fighting. The wounded soldiers were dying at the front, waiting. So Marie had a brilliant and brave idea. She would bring the machines to the soldiers. She put X-ray machines into cars and small trucks, turning ordinary vehicles into little mobile hospitals that could carry an X-ray machine right to the edge of the battlefield. And Marie did not just organize this from a comfortable office. She herself went to the front. She learned to drive. She learned to fix the cars when they broke down. She drove these X-ray cars right up to the fighting, into the mud and the danger, to help the wounded men. The soldiers gave the little cars a nickname. They called them the Little Curies. It is believed that her work helped more than 1 million wounded soldiers during the war. The scientist had become a rescuer. But there was a hidden price for all of this. All through her life, Marie had worked closely with radium and radiation. She had carried it in her pockets. She had kept a glowing tube of it by her bed like a nightlight because she loved its glow. Nobody understood back then that this radiation was slowly poisoning her body. The very thing she had discovered, the beautiful blue light, was harming her year after year. As Marie grew older, she became more and more unwell. She was often tired. Her eyes grew weak, and she nearly went blind, though she hid this as long as she could. The years of work with radiation had done their quiet, invisible damage. The glow she had loved so much had slowly taken her strength away. In the year 1934, Marie became very ill. Her body could no longer make healthy blood. It was a sickness almost certainly caused by all those years near radiation. She went to a quiet place in the mountains to rest, but it was too late. There, far from her laboratory, Marie Curie died. She was 66 years old. She had given her whole life to science. And in the end, the danger inside it that no one had understood had taken her life. She died from the very discovery that had made her famous. Even her old notebooks, the ones she wrote in during those years in the shed, are still radioactive today. They are still dangerous to touch so many years later. They are kept in special protective boxes. That is how powerful and how lasting her work was. So what do we learn from the story of Marie Curie? We see a girl who had everything against her. She was poor. She lost her mother and her sister when she was very young. She lived in a country that was not free. She was a woman in a time when women were told they could not do great things. Any one of these walls could have stopped her, but she climbed over all of them. She teaches us that a wall in front of you is not the end. When the university in Poland closed its doors to her, she waited, she worked, she crossed a whole continent, and she found another door. When her beloved Pierre died, she did not fall apart. She stood up and continued their work. Again and again, life knocked her down, and again, she rose. And Marie also teaches us about giving. She discovered radium, and radium became very valuable. She could have become rich. Some people told her to keep the secret of how to make it so that she could sell it and earn a fortune. But Marie said no. She believed that science belonged to everyone, so she gave the knowledge away freely for the good of the world. She wanted her discovery to heal people, not to make her rich. Today, all over the world, the work of Marie Curie still saves lives. Her discoveries are used to fight terrible diseases, like cancer. Every day, in hospitals in every country, patients are treated with ideas that began in that cold, poor Paris shed, with a tired woman stirring a great pot in the dark. The poor girl from Warsaw, the girl who was not allowed to go to school with the boys, became one of the greatest scientists who ever lived. She won the highest prize in the world not once but twice. She saw a light that no one had ever seen. And that light still shines today, more than 100 years later, all the way to you at this very moment. Thank you for listening and for learning English with me today. I hope this story was clear and easy to follow. If you liked it, tell me in the comments which part of the world you are watching me from. I love reading your messages. And if you want more true stories told slowly in simple English, stay with me. Because history is full of powerful and human stories, and together we are only just beginning.